Edward Wasnage joins us, lecturer in politics and international studies at the Open University. Edward, thank you very much for being with us. An act of piracy, says Mr. Hunt, or justifiably an act of revenge, according to the Iranians. Where do you think the truth lies on this one?
Well, it's very difficult to say without access to the intelligence files that our political leaders have. But I think what we're seeing here is a kind of tit for tat type scenario. Jeremy Hunt talks about an act of international piracy by the Iranian government, but the Iranian government equally talk about the seizure of the tanker off the Straits of Gibraltar last week as an act of piracy in similar terms as well. So we are kind of seeing both sides seeking to take the moral high ground, I suppose, in this confrontation.
Indeed. And one could perhaps see a situation where a return of both ships could just end this situation. However, there's always going to be this tension about what happens in the Strait of Hormuz, and Jeremy Hunt there talking about the action being taken to make sure that there's a safe passage of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. What might that protection be? What kind of shape might it take, do you think?
Well, I think what Jeremy Hunt is proposing is a kind of multinational force, perhaps similar to what we've seen off the coast of Somalia in terms of multinational efforts to combat piracy in that region. But I think what he's trying to do with this is really trying to show that the UK has some kind of international support for its position. And that's been questionable, really, because the silence over the British seizure of the tanker in the Mediterranean was quite deafening from its European allies, even though the UK said this was taking this action, because Iran was contravening EU sanctions in terms of the export of its oil. So I think it's important for the UK to try and gather international allies at a time where it could easily be seen as being quite isolated and actually really following US policies towards Iran.
The other story we're looking at is the alleged spies, US spies, arrested, 17 of them, some already sentenced to death. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that in particular because very little is confirmed about this and denials are coming from both sides. But on a broader sense, given what else is happening, is there a danger here of falling into a wider conflict, even a war, almost by accident?
Well, yeah, I think so, because listening to what your colleague was saying in the previous report, that there is a kind of information war going on here, and we do see that there's a real danger of kind of miscalculation, because these are actually calculated steps each side are taking, seeking to gain the upper hand in this conflict. So there is a potential that missteps and miscalculations could lead to a kind of military confrontation. We saw that the US came quite close to taking military action against Iran a couple of weeks ago after the drone was shot down. But we are seeing claim and counterclaim all the time, and I think from Iran's perspective, it's really important that they show and maintain their independence in their foreign policy and in their international affairs, to show that they're not going to be kind of pushed around. So I think it wants to show that it has a strong presence in the region. After all, this is in its own backyard, and it doesn't want to see an increase in foreign military power coming into the Persian Gulf.
Dr. Edward Wasage at the Open University, thank you very much indeed.